A very warm welcome back to our Teens Talk Show.
Today, our topic is the highs of life, how drugs can affect young people.
I'm Maury, and today I'm going to be hosting with Julia, and we're joined today by our lovely panelists, Naomi and Marvelous. Before we start, I thought it'd be interesting if we could just start off the conversation with a game. Today, we could play Two Truths and a Lie.
Yeah, so
Naomi, do you want to kick us off?
I'll be starting off with my two truths and a lie. So there, should I explain how it works?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll say 3 facts about myself, and then you guys have to guess which one the lie is and then which one the truth is.
Yeah.
So my 3 facts are, I used to have an extra finger as a baby, which they had to surgically remove. I was a theater kid back in the day, and I used to play the ukulele.
Interesting.
Who wants to guess?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the 6 fingers is a lie.
Oh, okay.
I think the ukulele is a lie.
Okay, what about you, Julia?
I think the 6 fingers is a lie.
Okay, it was a lie, yeah. I was a theater kid back in first and second year, and I did used to play the ukulele, but I never had an extra finger. I think a baby that I knew had an extra finger, which was really weird.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, my fact, I can swim, I'm 6'1", and I play the drums.
Okay, the lie is that you're 6'1".
Yeah, I think that's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll agree with them.
Yeah, the lie is I can swim.
Oh well. Don't worry. There's
Really
always
being
time
the
to learn.
stereotypes about this.
There's always time to learn. Well.
Oh.
Anyways.
I just wanted to share something really quick. Something big happened to me this week, and I just thought everyone else would want to know about it. I was just eating my food, had a little bread roll, and I was searching around the back of my mouth for the food, as you do. And I discovered that I got a new tooth. I got a baby tooth, and I just thought that was a really big moment that I'd like to share with everyone. Thank you, guys. I have 29 teeth now.
Very good, very good.
Thanks.
Well, moving on from the topic of teeth and swimming, our topic today is drugs. So since we'll be discussing about it, does anyone want to share what they know about drugs? Maybe Julia, how do they affect your body or your understanding of them?
Yeah, so I actually have a definition for drugs. It says drugs are substances that change a person's mental or physical state, which affect the way your brain works, how you feel, behave, your understanding and senses, making the individual unpredictable and possibly dangerous. Some of the actual effects that drugs can have on your body is they can accelerate your heart rate, they can increase your blood pressure, you can't control your mind. Then some of the more common kind of factors like visible effects on your body would be that you kind of look disoriented, then your eyes get bloodshot, you kind of stumble about the place, kind of slur your words a bit, you kind of slow down, and those are just some of the kind of visible effects.
No, yeah, it's interesting to see how the drugs take over your body. But drugs is such a broad term. Maybe Marvelous, can you go into the specifics maybe of the main types of drugs?
Yeah, so like I've got like 2 types of drugs written down here. I've got like the depressants. Those types slows down the messages between the brain and the body, and they affect like concentration and coordination between the brain and the body as well. And then I've got the hallucinogens or the psychedelic drugs. These ones affect the senses. It causes numbness and dizziness, and it changes the sense of reality.
Yeah, well, now since Marvelous kind of spoke to us about some of the different types of drugs, we're going to get into the uses and misuses of those types of drugs. So there are actually some benefits of drugs, the prescription drugs in particular, for example, for helping people with different chronic conditions such as arthritis, and there's also anxiety, depression, and HIV. One of the most common ones is like a form of cannabis. It's called CBD oils, different oils and different things like that. They actually help people with the pains, which they interrupt the pain sensors in your brain, which is actually kind of cool that like you can actually take something that will interrupt those connections and not make you feel that pain.
Interesting. Yeah, I think before we move on, we need to make the distinction between drugs for medications and also drugs that are used for like illegal or recreational purposes. But Naomi, would you want to dive deeper into the misuses of those drugs for medications as well?
Yeah, so misuses of drugs, I think believe an example of that would be whenever someone's gone through surgery and their GP or their doctor will prescribe them with a painkiller to relieve them of that pain, and then that person will go home and then they'll take the drug to obviously relieve them of that pain. But then some people would take advantage of that and go the step further, and then whenever they feel like a small thing in their body, maybe they've got like their pinky hurts or something in their elbow, they'll decide, let me take 1 or 2 of the painkillers so that I don't feel it anymore. And then they become over dependent on that painkiller, and then what their body will eventually do is will get a tolerance, or yeah tolerance on that drug. And so anytime they feel pain in their leg or something, they'll be like, I'll take 2, but then the 2 no longer works for them because they've built up this tolerance. And so they'll start taking like 5 or 6 drugs or painkillers instead to relieve themselves. And what that leads to is an overdose and then eventually death. And I think that's quite scary with prescription drugs anyway. Yeah. And then you've got things, not prescription things, but like e-cigarettes, like vaping and snus, which is, it's not new, but it's becoming popular in TikTok again. I think some footballers are doing it as well. But it's like a patch of nicotine. It's supposed to be, I don't think it's supposed to be like nicotine patches, but they're little sachets of nicotine that people will put in the roof of their mouth, just between their gums and their cheek, and they'll leave it there for like 2-3 hours so it can get absorbed into their thing, just to feel the effects of nicotine, I guess. And things like that were supposed to be used to maybe get off cigarettes. People use it as a recreational drug. There's been, when I was doing my research, it showed that in 2021, the year 2021 and 2022, vaping had increased by 50% within teenagers. But whenever you go back and check again how many of those teenagers were on cigarettes, the NHS says that only 12% of those teenagers had ever used a cigarette. And that's not to say that they were using it continuously. That's just like, oh, they've used it once. So you can see there's definitely been an abuse.
And you mentioned TikTok. Would you say that the likes of TikTok and Instagram have influenced how people use them and the frequency people use them at?
Oh yeah, like I had never heard of it before, but then I had seen it on TikTok one day. I was like, oh, it's a new thing. And then all of a sudden, I'm seeing it in school. I'm seeing people sit down, and it's nasty. It's gross. People like sit down. They'll have like the lid. It'll be filled with like the packets that have been in their mouth. Or just put it there. And it's just gross. But I think TikTok definitely plays into it on social media.
Yeah, because it's important to like discuss why people actually take the drugs, because we can just talk about the uses and the misuses, but I think going deeper into why people do it, maybe the curiosity of it, seeing your friends doing it, seeing it on TikTok, as Naomi mentioned, or maybe that even drug dependency, people who've been on it for a long time, to be able to get off the drug, the withdrawal symptoms they experience from that are quite severe.
Yeah.
And I think it's just best to stay on the drug. I'd rather just stay on the drug. Or it could just be, you know, a case of peer pressure, different types of things. So, yeah.
And it's a shame because it does help them. Like some people will say vaping has helped them get off their thing, but it's replacing one addiction with another. And I think that's the big issue there.
So kind of on that topic of like using the drugs and stuff like that. So Maury, what would you say are the laws and kind of regulations around drugs?
Well, in the UK currently, the prison sentence for a Class A drug would be 7 years. For a Class B drug, it would be 5 years. And a Class C drug, it would be 2 years. Class A drugs are kind of like the harder type of drugs, such as like heroin, cocaine, and LSD. Class B drugs are slightly milder, but they are such as cannabis, speed, and ketamine. And Class C drugs would be the soft type of drugs, such as like tranquilizers, GHB, and anabolic steroids.
Yeah, and it's just kind of crazy to see that a lot of this is kind of affecting a lot of us young people. Marvelous, what are the kind of most common drugs that young people use?
Yeah, like a commonly misused drugs among youths is spice. It's like a synthetic, like cannabis. It's in the form of an oil that people smoke in like e-cigs, and they're much more harmful and unpredictable than natural cannabis. And the risk of it is like you get headaches, inability to move, seizures, and dizziness. Like it's so like crazy to see that people younger than us are actually taking this stuff. People our age are actually taking this stuff.
Yeah. And would you guys say like the law is doing enough to, you know, crack down on people using these type of drugs?
Well, I personally don't think they're not doing enough. A lot of youth don't seem to care about the laws that are in place, maybe because they're unaware or they simply do not care. there's a place, Uruguay, and they have no laws on drugs, but their death rate related to drugs is very, very low compared to the UK. And you wonder, maybe it's because they've got no laws in place, and maybe it's because here people want to rebel, they want to seem cool, so they'll start selling or things like that. And I think that's selling is very impactful on the youth. Like there are certain groups that will help kids or help young people sell out to people on the streets, and I think it's dangerous. Or I believe it's dangerous as getting yourself involved in those kind of groups. There's a story about this boy who used to sell casually to his like friends, and he would get whatever he was selling from this group. Eventually he was like, I don't want to sell anymore. I think he was going off junior or something like that. Like he was maybe around our age or maybe like 20 or something. He said he didn't want to sell anymore. And I guess the group he was selling for didn't like that, because one day, his old family home, a family had went on vacation. They came back and they had discovered him in his childhood bedroom with his knees shot in. And I think a lot of children don't think about like what could happen. Like I feel one day you're gonna wake up and you're gonna decide, I don't want to do this. I don't want to live this lifestyle anymore. But it'll be really, really hard for you to come out of it. And I don't think a lot of children think about, like, they don't think about their futures. You've got on Top Boy, for example, people seem to like it. It's like cool or whatever. But I don't think people think about the message inside, where it's like, you do all of this, you try to become like the top in the hierarchy or whatever it is, or in the top boy in that show anyway. But in the process of that, you, like Jamie, one of the main characters in it, he ended up dying trying to become the top boy. And then what was it? His brother's friend ended up dying as well. And yeah, his older brother as well, he like separated himself from that. So it creates distance. And there are also health problems from that as well. In Vancouver, Canada, and then in the USA as well, you can see there's this problem with fentanyl. It's a drug. I think most people will inject it into their bodies, and what it does is that, like, it gives you a high, I guess. People will feel drowsy from it. You'll see like people will be limping over, like people can't stand straight. They'll literally be like that. They call it like the zombie apocalypse or whatever it is, and that's really awful, especially if you're young and they're really addictive. Like something that was supposed to be used, it was supposed to be used to help severe cancer. Something that was supposed to be used for good is now being used as a recreational thing. And especially on children, that's your life. That's pretty much your life over, unless you can find help to get off the street, or to get help to get off that drug as well.
Yeah, like I agree with Naomi, and obviously it's like not to dismiss any of that, but like sometimes you kind of have to feel sorry for some of these people, because
Yeah,
like she was saying about the Top Boy situation, there's so many people that they kind of get into it because something has happened in their lives and they literally have no other options left, and they got involved because of friends or so on and so forth, and this is their only way of making money. And it's just sad to see that people our age, people younger than us even, are being affected by this, and drug gangs, all the things surrounding it. It's just like you kind of start to think like, what has our world come to? Before, you would see kids playing on the street and doing all sorts, but nowadays, like, as kids, you don't really see them going out much because you're scared. Like as a parent, you could be scared of saying, oh, if they go out, they're going to join a gang. If they go out, they're going to start selling drugs. They're going to start taking drugs. It's just like, it's a weird world that we're living in.
Yeah. It is quite unfortunate for the families, because especially the families, trying to reach out to the people maybe they've lost to drugs. It is harder. Also just to remember in the families in the process that they also are going through it as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I also think that the law is helpful in a way, but have you ever seen those laws being like enforced? Like, have you ever seen like a case of someone, a drug dealer or someone actually being put in jail for 7 years or something? Because if there's like a law that if those laws are being enforced, like it's going to put that fear in the people that are like actually doing this stuff, that no, I don't want to spend 7 years in jail because of a stupid mistake or something. So are those laws actually being enforced? If those laws are being enforced, I think it's going the drug rates are going to like reduce by a bit.
Do you think the laws maybe need to be harder, like a longer prison sentence,
Not
or
necessarily harder, like just being
more
enforced. Yeah.
Yeah,
Ended
I
up.
get that.
But you know what's so crazy is that like even in jails, in prisons and stuff, they still do drugs there. They still sell drugs there. Those criminals that we're talking about, even them themselves, they still carry on. They get drugs from the outside, bring them in and sell them in the prisons, and it's then they get benefits from that inside of the prisons
Yeah.
as well. But like the laws just really are not helping it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about the different impacts, we are going to bring in a special guest, Angela Ifolaja, the program manager for Bradbury Hub, who's going to discuss more to us and to the rest of you guys about the impacts on youth.
Hi.
Hey.
So just we've been listening obviously very intently to your discussions and the insights and some of the facts and figures that you've brought into this, and obviously the impacts as well to young people. And we just want to talk about a different aspect. It kind of follows on from what you were saying, Naomi, about young people now, those who are selling drugs, for example. So I want to talk to you about something called county lines. This is a term that has been known in England for quite a few years now, but we're starting to kind of see the impact of it now in Northern Ireland, and it's very important that we bring awareness. You know, the police forces are aware of it. Obviously, people who are involved are aware of it. But how much does the ordinary person on the street? How much do adults who have care of children? How much are they aware? How much are young people aware of this? So, just want to bring that into the discussion because it's important to raise the lid on some of the things that we're now seeing as a bigger trend in Northern Ireland. So, what are county lines? What is that? The National Crime Agency. I'm just going to read out their definition of what county lines are. It says county lines is where illegal drugs are transported from one area to another, often across police and local authority boundaries, although not exclusively, usually by children or vulnerable people who are coerced into it by gangs. The county line is the mobile phone line used to make the orders of drugs. So it's areas where drugs are taken into. So the areas where those drugs are imported into or brought into are reporting increased levels of violence and weapons related crimes as a result of this trend, right? So that's the definition that the National Crime Agency gave. There's another definition by the NPCC, which is the National sort of Association of Police Chief Constables. It says the 2018 Home Office Serious Crime Strategy states the NPCC definition of a county line is a term used to describe gangs and organized criminal networks involved in exporting illegal drugs into one or more areas within the UK. Using dedicated mobile phone lines or other forms of deal lines, they are likely to exploit children and vulnerable adults to move and to store the drugs and money, and they will often use coercion, intimidation, violence, including sexual violence and weapons. Right? So when you talk about county lines, that's what we're talking about. The abuse, the coercion, the forcing of young people to sell drugs, either within an area, and sometimes they're taken outside of an area. So, for example, in the in the mainland UK, you would have often heard stories about this young person has gone missing, right? And then within a few days or a week or so, the young person reappears again. No explanation as to where they've been, but in many of those cases, the understanding is that this young child has been taken across another part of the UK to go and sell drugs because they don't know them in that area, so they're not suspect, and then they come back again. So that's what we see in the mainland UK.
Yeah.
County lines.
Yeah, Angela, you mentioned that it's recently come to Northern Ireland. Why do you think that is?
Well, as I guess as organized gangs begin to look at other opportunities, right? So remember that when we're talking about, you know, gangs who are involved in drugs, there's this sort of idea of their turf. You know, they have an area that they're in control of, and in order to kind of gain and increase their their business, moving out into other areas where they feel that there are opportunities. And so I guess it's to be expected over time that it will move from some of the urban areas in the UK and move into other areas as Northern Ireland. So I was looking at a heat map. It was a map of the UK, and we'll show this on the screen so you can see this. This was done in 2022. And it showed all of the hotspots around the UK where a lot of this is happening, where county lines have been reported. And you see a lot of red in all of England, but you can start to see it in Northern Ireland. So it's something that's becoming a real concern here. And we just really want to raise that awareness. Yeah.
Because I know you were saying about different like vulnerable people, like children and stuff, but like what particular group would you say that they kind of tend to maybe go for?
Yeah.
And like, because you know, like you could see like a child walking on the street, so like would you say that, oh yeah, they're just going to grab them? And
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what lends a person to being vulnerable to this sort of thing, right? So many times they are exploiting difficulties in that child's life. So for example, if they see a child that looks like maybe their parents are struggling or families struggling, either financially or there are issues already there, so it's like, coming alongside and pretending to be that big brother or that person that cares, buying. So you find that, they buy them things to kind of gain their loyalty. They'll talk about looking after and protecting them. So if a child is being bullied, for example, that could be another angle in where we will protect you, but obviously all of that comes at a cost. The problem is that the young person doesn't know that at the beginning, right? Social media is another place where children are kind of pulled into that as well. If there's unsupervised access to social media and people are contacting these children, young people, and we're talking about children, ages very, very young, sort of, there was a newspaper article where a young lady who's now older but was saying, look, from the age of 11, I found myself in this situation. I wasn't attending school. Nobody was asking why. I was involved in so much. She was all sorts from the age of 11. So very young children are being brought into this, and some of those they're exploiting vulnerabilities, and they are, trying to prove as if I'm the one that's going to help you. So they get lured into it, and young people who are involved in it don't know in the early stages that actually you're being abused. They think they're being looked after, but actually they are being abused. And what we find, the pattern is that quickly, soon after that, it turns sour, it turns violent.
And would you say that for these children to be able to get out of this circle, it's hard for them? Would you say it's difficult?
Yeah, because there's coercion, there's the threat. So there are young people who are stabbed because they try to get out. There are young people who are killed because they try to get out. There are young people who, we've heard stories where they would be given drugs to go and sell. I mean, we've heard quite a lot of this in the UK. The problem is we don't have too much information right now, too much official information in Northern Ireland, but there's a lot that we can see in the UK. So for example, one of the tactics is where they give a young person drugs to go and sell, and they say, go and sell it, in this place, for example. Somebody's going to buy. They get to that place, and the person that's supposed to buy robs them, right? Beats them up, gets the drugs from them, right? So they now have a situation where they were giving drugs worth, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is, and they were supposed to come back with the money. But they've been attacked, the drugs have been taken away, they've come back with nothing, right? So they go back to the drug dealer who sent them, right? And the drug dealer say, well, you owe me money now. But the crazy thing is, it was the drug dealer that set it up in the first place, right? It didn't just happen. It was the drug dealer that set them up to get robbed, so that this child now becomes entrapped in that world. And they now have to continue to do this to try and pay off a debt that will never end. So once they're in, it's hard. So we've got to look out for those telltale signs that might be suggesting that a child is starting to be lured into this, so that we can put a stop to that before they get deep in, because to come out of it is problematic. Now, there is a way out. I mean, I heard you talking about what's the law doing. There are, the law is doing something. We hear about crackdowns on drug gangs and so on. So the law does catch up to them. The problem is that the intimidation that people experience. So they don't want to come forward. They don't want to come forward because they're intimidated. But the law is there and it does crack down on it, but it's a lot harder once a person is in. But it's not impossible to come out. So it's important to cry out for help. You know, and you know, if you're you know maybe an adult in a young person's life that's kind of listening to this and thinking, well, how do I know? What are the things to look out for? You know, so things like your young person is starting to dress, you know, differently to what they used to dress, right? They're coming with expensive things that they can't explain. You didn't buy it for them. They don't have the money for it. Coming with trainers, coming with gadgets, coming with multiple phones, things like that. These are all sort of telltale signs. So people, like I said, people going missing for periods of time with no explanation. Young people moving around with friends that maybe you haven't seen before, perhaps even slightly older ones, and you're wondering, you know, how did you come in contact? There's no explanation as to how you're coming into contact with these people. Unexplained injuries, antisocial behavior, change in mood and character. These are the sort of things that we want to be looking out for as an adult. And for young people, you know, when you're in a situation where somebody is offering you things that maybe your responsible adult can't, and they're coming along as though, you know, we're coming alongside you, you got to ask yourself the question all the time, for what? Right? Because the truth is nothing goes for nothing. I heard you say something like nobody wins, and it's true. You don't win. You really don't. So when somebody's offering you stuff, you've got to be asking yourself, why are they offering me this? Right? The chances are that it's because they're wanting something for you that is a far higher price than you can pay.
Yeah. It's also important to like remember nothing comes for free.
Yeah.
You know, there's always a behind to what someone is doing for you. Just always remember and look out for the signs, I think.
Yeah.
It's important.
And we also want to maybe even open it up to the audience if anybody may have any questions or any more points as well to add to the conversation.
Do you think peer pressure has a massive impact on drug use in our generation?
Well, yeah, I feel like with peer pressure is just hard on everything, on drug use, on everything in general, but especially when it comes to like peer pressure from like people that are older than you, because I know that it can be seen as cool to have friends that are older than you, or friends that, let's say you're in secondary school and you have friends that don't go to school anymore and they're like 2-3 years older than you. You're like, oh, I'm one of the cool kids. You know what? I've got friends that are way older than me. And you just have to be careful, because with peer pressure, it's very difficult to kind of get out of it, because you're like, okay, I need to be more like this person. I want to be cool like this one day. I want to be able to be somebody. I want people to look at me and be like, yeah, I want to be like him. So with peer pressure, it's a very, very big thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
You also need to be careful. I wanted to say this before. You should also be really careful about who your friends are, or who you
Yeah.
would consider your friend, because you need to remember your friend would never force you to do something that you don't want to do. So if you see someone and they're like, oh, you know, like a little bit wouldn't hurt nobody, a little bit might hurt me. We're different. Like my body would react differently to whatever. Yeah. So I think people should, you know, reevaluate and think about who your friends are, and are they really your friend, and do they have your best interest? Yeah.
That's very true. Very important point. Are there any other questions in the audience, or?
Do you think that school educates children enough on this topic?
Well, I know that some schools will have their talk, maybe their one-off talk. I think, yeah, for me, I think I had that one talk. I can't remember when, maybe like 4th, 5th year, and that was it for me. And then certain schools will have certain incidences at their school, and I feel like they're quite hush-hush about the situation. Obviously, you don't want to expose like what's been going on, but if there's like a pattern, I feel like they should, you know, ante up the talks a wee bit. So I think schools could definitely do more, but at the end of the day, it's down to the student.
Yeah, I do believe schools are trying their best, you know, to educate students on the impacts of drugs and the dangers of the drugs. But I feel like it just needs to be more specific.
Yeah.
Maybe with real life stories that like show real life, you know, people. I think that really opens the eyes of the students more to what's happening.
We had a alcohol talk at school, and they showed like video examples of like people getting beat up in Belfast after like a drunken night out. And I think if they did things like that for like drugs, it would be really, really helpful, because I was like scared. I was like, whoa, like what was it? It was happening in front of one place. I was like, I walk past that every single day. I can't believe people like break out and fight there over drugs, like, or not over drugs, alcohol. I think someone, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, and as Angela was talking about the county lines and the vulnerability of some children, I think schools also need to provide that, and they are doing that. Just providing that safe space where children can go and speak if they're feeling like low self-esteem in the house, or maybe someone, if they want to talk about maybe a random person that's starting to approach them.
Yeah.
I think just having that safe space in school, because not always isn't the home life isn't always the best. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's helpful. But I think there was a recent example about a county line that happened recently.
Also, there was a recent article in Belfast Live online. It was an online article, and the title of the article, well, the caption says, "NI children being groomed by drug gang like paedophiles groom victims," says Belfast youth worker. So the point that's been made is that it is really organized now, that children are being brought into this kind of environment. And I know, that's a heavy thing to say on a show like this, but it's important that we bring these things to our attention, because young children are being essentially prepared and groomed in the drug world. I'm just going to read a couple of lines. The first lines of the article says, "Children across Northern Ireland are being criminally exploited by paramilitaries and organized crime gangs who are using them as cover for their illegal enterprises. They have been coerced into drug dealing, taking part in ram raids and stealing cars, with them being threatened with violent reprisals if they do not do what they are told by the older criminals. Youth workers in Belfast have said that the issue has reached a crisis point and that something needs to be done urgently to address the criminal grooming that is destroying lives in the city." This stuff is real, right? It's real. It is increasing, and we need to raise more awareness. And very importantly, if you're a young person that has been caught up in this, the advice we want to give you is that there is a way out. The gangs would want to make you feel like there is no way out, but there is a way out. And you can start off by speaking to a trusted adult in your life. You can reach out to organizations such as the NSPCC, for example. We will have some information in the description of this video for you. If you need help to reach out, if you want to reach out to us, we can signpost you, but there is a way out. Please don't suffer in silence. Please don't allow yourself to be told that you can't do anything about this. There is a way out.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. Yeah.
So I'd say that on that note, that I just want to say a massive thank you to our panelists, Naomi and Marvelous, and I also wanted to say thank you to my fellow host, Maury, for being here today, and also a massive thank you to our special guest, Angela. Now, to conclude, we are going to have, like Angela said, we're going to have websites linked in the description down below to say if you have any more questions or concerns, that you can go look it up as well. And if you have any questions, you can make sure to contact us as well. And thank you so much for watching.